Now, over the last several days, 60 Minutes, which, as I said, has been steadfastly pro-Israel in the past, they have several correspondents who are outspoken Zionists and defenders of the Israeli state, including Leslie Stahl. She always has been. She's covered Israel many times in 60 Minutes, and it's always very favorable to Israel. This report was about two things at CBS that 60 Minutes aired on Sunday night. One was how much U.S. weaponry, the key role it has played in the destruction of Gaza. And then number two, how many people deep inside the government at very high levels have been vehemently opposed to the U.S. arming and funding Israel, pointing out not just that it's morally wrong, but that it's extremely destructive, harmful, and subversive to American national interests. Here from CBS News yesterday, you see the headline, former State Department officials concerned about the U.S. role in Israel's war in Gaza. Here is a former U.S. diplomat Hala Rarit, telling CBS News about how she was tasked with monitoring and tracking the heinous acts and war crimes that the Israelis were carrying out in Gaza and the resistance she experienced inside the U.S. government as she tried to document them.
What is happening in Gaza would not be able to happen without U.S. arms. That's without a doubt.
So how long have you... Hala Rarit was an American diplomat who spent nearly 2 decades posted in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, where she worked on human rights and counterterrorism. She was stationed in Dubai on October 7th, where part of her job was to monitor Arab press and social media to document how America's role in the war was perceived in the Middle East. We've obtained daily reports Rarit sent to senior leadership in Washington containing gruesome images and her warnings.
I would show the complicity that was indisputable. Fragments of U.S. bombs next to massacres of mostly children, and that's the devastation. It's been overwhelmingly children.
When you tried to speak out, vocalize what you saw happening in Gaza, you feel like you were told to shut up.
Yes. I would show images of children that were starved to death. In one incident, I was basically berated, don't put that image in there. We don't want to see it. We don't want to see that the children are starving to death.
Who told you that?
A colleague.
A superior?
Yeah. I was told the contrary by others. Keep them in. We need to see it.
3 months into the war, Rarit says she was told her reports were no longer needed. She resigned last April.
I don't think we are anywhere close to understanding the full scope of what has been done to Gaza. I've talked about this before. There was just a study released by Lancet, which I realize has undermined its credibility during the COVID pandemic in ways that we've covered many times. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean that every study that makes its way to Lancet is fabricated or false. And there's one that is highly documented that provides evidence that the death toll in Gaza from Israeli violence is at least 50% higher than the health officials in Gaza are claiming. That the official death toll is 46,000. The Lancet article estimates that just from Israeli violence, it's about 65,000. There's been all sorts of reasons to believe, despite the U.S. media and Joe Biden's attempt to impugn these death numbers as coming from the, quote, Hamas-run health department in Gaza and therefore unreliable. In the past, the official death count from Israeli bombing that came from these agencies is always undercounted because they simply count the number of bodies that go through the morgue. And so many of these bodies are under rubble or blown up to bits and never end up making it to the morgue. And that's to say nothing of all the people who have died from starvation or treatable diseases. They were unable to get treated because of the lack of medication and the destruction of most hospitals in Gaza. We've seen enough to know how hideous this war is that the United States is absolutely responsible for, but the true extent of it, to say nothing of the utter horrors, the morally twisted, demented behavior of the Israeli soldiers inside their detention camps. They've rounded up huge numbers of Palestinians and put them in dungeons with no charges. People have just been disappeared. There's widespread, well-documented reports of sexual abuse and rape inside these detention facilities. We've seen video of Israeli soldiers mass raping Palestinian detainees and then protest in defense of the soldiers who did that when the Israeli government was forced to try and discipline them. All of this is going to come out and emerge over the next several months and years once this war finally ends in a way that I think is going to be shocking. Back in April, NPR reported on the resignation of that State Department diplomat, the one that was just interviewed by 60 Minutes. There you see the headline, State Department diplomat resigns in protest of U.S. policy in Gaza. Quote, I've been a diplomat for 18 years, really my entire adult life. But the policy really became unacceptable. I was holding out, hoping to try to change things from the inside, until I realized at one point that this policy was undermining U.S. interest. It was destabilizing the Middle East. And it was indeed a failed policy. And with that, I decided that I could no longer be part of the department and decided to submit my resignation. I wrote daily reports back to this department initially after the conflict for months, explaining and reporting and documenting how the U.S. was being seen on pan-Arab media, how our favorability was plummeting, how we were demonized as child killers. I did this formally, I did this informally. Again, I was stopped from doing this, but I kept on doing it. It became abundantly clear that no matter what I did, no matter what other diplomats did, the policy was the policy. The idea that U.S. support for Israel, steadfast, unstinting, unconditional, limitless support for Israel, is part of the reason, in fact, one of the main drivers for why there's so much anti-American anger and hatred and animus in that region, has been a known secret in Washington for many years. Top generals have pointed it out and then been attacked as anti-Semites and forced to apologize when doing so. Here was Harrods in March of 2010. There you see the headline, U.S. General, Israeli-Palestinian conflict foments anti-U.S. sentiment. General David Petraeus said, conflict presents direct challenges to our ability to advance U.S. interest in the region. And then he was forced to apologize very shortly thereafter from the Jerusalem Post in March of 2010. Quote, I didn't say Israel was intransigent. Petraeus phones the IDF chief to reassure him his comments were spun out of context. It's extremely obvious if the entire Arab region, if the entire Middle East, the populations of Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and the Arab Emirates and Bahrain and everyone in that region is watching the same video that you're watching, but even more so on Al Jazeera and other Arab outlets that actually show it all day long, of course they're going to see not just that Israel is slaughtering huge numbers of Palestinians, but that there's no way for them to have done so and do so without the direct support of the Biden administration that provides all those weapons that they use. 60 Minutes actually documented that one of the worst bombings Israel carried out that killed huge numbers of civilians had American markings all over the weapons they used.
This is the scene filmed in May by CBS News in Gaza. Children on top of rubble playing with ammunition casings. The same casings used to prop up these tent cities. A close look reveals where they come from. Printed on the side, USA, DOD for Department of Defense. Across this now decimated 25-mile-long strip of land, America's stamp is everywhere.
And you can just see, just look at that picture right there for anyone who wants to claim that this has been some sort of discriminating, targeted bombing campaign on the part of Israel. You look at Gaza, every part of it, and it's just fully in rubble, block after block after block, been flattened indiscriminately. Residential buildings, hospitals, school, all of it. Mosques, all of it has been bombed. There's barely anything left standing. And there's 2.3 million people living in this densely packed area with their entire civilian infrastructure destroyed for a long, long time. Here was the same 60 Minutes segment last night that shows one specific war crime for sure, which was the use of a 2,000-pound American bomb, several of them, in fact, which even the United States has stopped using in urban areas because of the impossibility of avoiding not just quote-unquote collateral damage, but massive, massive killing of children and all sorts of civilians. Here's what 60 Minutes documented.
Among the weapons Israel requested from the United States, 2,000-pound bombs, one of the most powerful in the U.S. arsenal, typically used to destroy large targets like weapons depots. Nearly 3 weeks after the October 7th attacks, the Israeli military posted a video on social media of an airstrike in Gaza City, saying it targeted a Hamas tunnel. More than 100 people were also killed, including 81 women and children, according to Air Wars, a British nonprofit that monitors civilian harm in conflict. This is what the neighborhood looked like before the strike, and this is the aftermath. Civilian harm in conflict.
Here is what, prior to October 7th, for those of you who want to claim, or anyone who wants to claim, that the Israelis have been targeted, they've been careful, the most mortal army in the world is the IDF. Here is what this strip of land of this neighborhood looked like prior to Israel's U.S.-funded and armed bombing campaign in Gaza. You see blocks of structures or residential structures and businesses standing, and then this very same area.
This is what the neighborhood looked like before the strike, and this is...
It's all gone. It's just not there anymore. It's just obliterated. It's flattened. Turned into a parking lot, essentially. So if you want to defend the Israelis, make those arguments, but don't lie to anybody and say that this has been a targeted, careful bombing campaign, when everyone can see with their own eyes that it's false to the point that even 60 Minutes now has to run an entire segment on how harmful this has been to the United States. Here's the rest of that.
The aftermath. Several sources we spoke to say Israel likely used multiple 2,000-pound American bombs. 2 months later, President Biden warned that Israel was losing support for what he called indiscriminate bombing. Last May, he halted a shipment of the 2,000-pound bombs.
Just to be clear, he halted that shipment for about a week or two. And when he halted it, the Israelis already had all the bombs that they needed. And there's no reason to be using 2,000-pound bombs in densely packed urban areas. No reason whatsoever, unless your goal is to completely obliterate the place that you're bombing. Did you resolve to get healthier this year as part of your New Year's resolution in 2025? If you did, great. If you didn't, you should think about it. So then the question is, how are you going to do it? With supplements? Okay, that's good. Some green fruit and vegetable drink? Fine. But then ask yourself, do any of these promise better health? They do not. What's the point of green drinks and health supplements if you aren't 100% confident that they'll improve your health? The Field of Green's Better Health Promise makes it radically different. Listen to this. Enjoy a delicious field of green drinks each day, and at your next checkup, your doctor will notice your improved health, or you get your money back. How in the world can Field of Greens promise better health? Because each fruit and vegetable was doctor selected for a very specific health benefit for some part of your body, some vital organ. There's a heart health group, lungs and kidney groups, metabolism, even healthy weight. One day a drink is all it takes. You'll look and feel healthier with more energy fast, and your doctor will notice your improved health, or you get your money back. Get 20% off your first order with the code Glenn at fieldofgreens.com. That's code Glenn at fieldofgreens.com. Fieldofgreens.com. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.